Hello, my beautiful people. Today, I would like to discuss um, about living with all the distraction that is all around us. And the story that comes to mind is that the story that I heard from one of my teachers about a monk by the name of Shogun Chopra. And he left Tibet when he was about 18. And the story starts when he met his primary teacher when he was about 8. And when he met his teacher, and the Chankan Chopra lived in a different monastery than his teacher. And it was a week on horseback to go to meet his teacher. But at least once a month, he would make a way to receive the teachings from his teacher. So he tells a story about being the young boy, somewhere between 9 and 10, 11. And it's early morning, and his teacher has asked him to come for some type of instruction. And he describes entering into the room, and his teacher sitting in front of the window, and he describes the soft early morning light on his teacher's face. And as his teacher looked up at him, and then he picked up this object from the table in front of him. His teacher picked up this object, and it sort of glimmered in the light. And Changan Chopra looked upon it, and he never seen anything like that in his life. He's seen some silver and look like maybe it was made from silver, some type of metal. And it had a long, straight bottom. And the top, the metal was sort of cut. And he's sort of looking at it, and he said, and his teacher's holding it up. And his teacher says to him, in the West, they use these to eat. They poke it into the meat, and then they lift it up and put it in their mouth. And then he held it out again and said, someday, he was talking to this young boy, Changan Chopra, you're going to have to go where people eat with these things. And you're going to teach them. And then he said, he smiled really broadly, and you may just find that they're much more interested in staying asleep than waking up. So that story always really struck me because of the imagery and the suspense that he didn't know what it was. And neither of them had the word fork for it. Fork would be just an arbitrary word too, because there was no word for fork in Tibetan. And said, you'll be teaching them, and you might find that they're much more interested in staying asleep than waking up. Like it's to say to this young boy, that's going to be a challenge, is to wake them up. So it means much more. Maybe habitually used to be unconscious than being conscious. So I always thought about this too. Trying not to be offended that they were talking about me after all. Surely I'm the exception to this rule. But I thought about it, and I thought about it. It's very true. And it seems there is more and more cultural support for unconsciousness. For instance, by that I mean not present. Instead of present and right there for what's happening, distracted. And distracted just because you have emails and you're seduced to check in your emails. You're seduced by wanting to watch television. You're seduced to wanting to watch entertainment of all kinds, which you don't have to go out to the movie anymore, And you're seduced by texting and cell phones and probably much more than I even know about. I know, for instance, that when I watch college kids, every once in a while, they kind of unfriend everybody and they go off of Facebook because they just go unconscious in front of a computer and just spend hours there. And it's probably, you can relate to that. And you can call it innocent. But some of the students commented to me that some of the teachers insist that kids do not bring their cell phones to the class. And the students say that they cannot believe how much more present they are when they don't have the cell phone. And I say, well, can you just turn it off? And they say, well, it vibrates whether there's any sound or not. So they cannot just resist just looking, and see what's coming on. And that's what I'm kind of getting on. This aspect of things growing us off, distracting us culturally, it's becoming so much more extensive, distracting us from just being present to what the teacher is saying, to let it penetrate and really educate and stimulate and get inspired instead of being half there and half not there. Like I have a friend who is professor at CU Berkeley, and she said that one day that she was having her students do presentations, and she went to the back of the room, and she was stunned to see everybody's laptops up, but they weren't typing notes, whatever she was saying. They were playing games. They were chatting with friends. They were watching movies. They were doing all kind of stuff, But she never picked up on it because they kind of looked up enough that she felt they were actually there. So that's one aspect of being more unconscious than conscious. But then there is another aspect that complicates it so much. Should we have anything painful in our life? Just on the odd chance that might be the case, that there is something up for us, that we have sadness or anger or resentment, bitterness, all boiled up about this or that, or completely unable to feel what we're feeling because it was so uncomfortable and we have so low tolerance for discomfort. So I'm sure from the earliest days, people tried to distract themselves from the unpleasantness of their lives and their own unpleasant, uncomfortable, unsettled feelings about themselves and just about difficult emotions. And so now with all this multitude of ways that you can distract yourself, as a teacher myself now, I find it's a big challenge to encourage people and to give people a message and help people to show up for themselves and actually feel what they feel and the importance of that. Being fully present with their own emotions and feelings and thoughts. That means getting out of the habit of distracting yourself, pulling yourself away when it's not easy to be there. So we know, all of us who have had or currently have addiction problems of any kinds, alcohol, drugs, any kinds of addiction actually, that almost always it's associated in some way with feelings that are so uncomfortable, so unbearable, sometimes even embarrassment about ourselves, or difficulties with feelings of what we feel when it's uncomfortable. That it's often addictions are a major exit to get away from those feelings. So stop and feel without distraction. Shut off the phone, log off the social media, and spend time with yourself. And the best way to do it is just go for a walk alone, preferably when everybody is still sleeping, early in the morning. Spend some time with yourself daily. And from my heart to yours, I spend the energies of love, compassion, gratitude, and forgiveness. So every moment of your life will be filled with joy and happiness.